Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. And now, just to let you know, we won't be on air for the next couple of days, but we will be back at the end of the week, so apologies for that. But do stay tuned, certainly for today's show, as today we will be talking about a powerful lobby from the British Sikh community has managed to ramp up the pressure on the British government, as now the government is becoming under intense pressure from even its own MPs to act over the deteriorating situation of Jagtar Singh Johal, plus, of course, many other key issues affecting the community, not least the long-promised 1984 inquiry. But in contrast, the New Zealand government acts preemptively to protect the nation's Sikhs with its intelligence services, asking the community to report any acts of transnational oppression. More on that in a moment. In Canada, we have a report after visiting the historic Gurdwara in Abbotsford, British Columbia. And in the US, we report how tourism and travel to the country is being affected by the current economic situation and, of course, the associated costs of the US economy. All this and more on today's show. But joining me, as always, for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus. Good morning to all the viewers out there. Welcome to a Monday show. Lots of exciting things going on. And most exciting, as always, is all the comments at the end of the show that we love when you send in. So keep them rolling. As Angus said, we'll be gone for a few days, but it doesn't mean we'll be away from reading those comments. Take care. Thanks. And back to you, Angus.
Absolutely. And James and I today together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And we will indeed, at the end of the show, take a look at Leslie great comments, so stay tuned for that. Right, James, lots to get through today. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
Let's take a look at the economic hit and the other impacts of the tariffs as well as the ICE raids happening throughout the US. Now, although it has been a little less than expected in terms of the Canadian tariffs coming this direction from the US, but with the global tariffs and the blanket tariffs also having some impact on not only the economy when it comes to imports, but also tourism. Tourism is being impacted by both of these items, both the tariffs and, of course, the ICE crackdowns, the people being detained. And that has grown concerning, especially when you figure just a 35% drop in tourism and visitors to the U.S. can hit the economy to a tune of $6.22 billion per month. That's not even a year, that's per month. And of course, that has a lot of tourism related industry executives talking to the president and trying to encourage people to come back to the US. Now, when it comes to this sort of problem, there are several factors, as I said. So let's break it down a bit here. Now, the chilling effect of the ICE arrests and detentions, and that is people that are being arrested or detained, and even a Canadian was wrapped up in that. And that's created a sense of uncertainty and fear among international travelers, particularly those from India. High-profile cases of students, workers, and tourists being detained or deported, and that's made a lot of headlines, including two MPs that were there, going over to Israel for a visit there. So there's not just the U.S. Stress there, but it seems that other borders are tightening up as well and making it tougher. So it's a global issue. So I think a lot of people are going to be more hesitant to not only avoid traveling to the U.S., but traveling internationally, I think, is going to be a concern for some. And they're going to be staying within their home countries and visiting local attractions, which is good for the local economies on that end. But when you look at the situation going on, that it's just making a lot of people think twice. But again, back specifically to the US, it's making people reconsider that. Now, if you couple into that, being that Canada and the US have probably the biggest volume of visitors going north and south of the border here for international travel, and that has a big impact of a third factor, and that is the fact that a lot of Canadians are angered about the 51 state rhetoric and referring to, even though people don't like necessarily Justin Trudeau across the country, not everybody, of course, but I'm just saying there's a vocal crowd. Even they are standing up and saying, this is enough, and they're insulted and upset by the actions of the U.S. government. So they are also really on this movement to spend your vacation time at home or in Canada this year. I know my mother, for example. She is actually going on a cruise over in your neck of the woods, Angus. So yeah, she's going to be flying that way and going on a cruise with my sister and niece and that. So yeah, it's, great for other destinations. But again, it is impacting a lot of different areas. People who are applying for different work visas, and whether that's through the temporary foreign worker program in the US or otherwise, they are reluctant because they don't know if that visa is going to be valid for the full duration, or if it can be canceled at any time, or if they can be denied at the border once they arrive. So again, it leaves a lot in limbo. And even certain high-end tech companies, some of the largest, that have offices for software development and training programs in Canada are looking to shuffle foreign workers coming in from India, for example, and sending them up to Canada or the Canadian base offices instead, so that they don't have to deal with the caps that have been instituted or the other concerns of the employees themselves. Now, when you look at that, it also really is going to hit states like Florida, California, and so forth. But when you look at the Indian travelers, they're opting for destinations that are more welcoming. And again, it's, a fear of visible minorities in the U.S., and that is the reality of it. That they have a fear that they're going to be rounded up by ICE, and that only is multiplied when you are a tourist with a visa. So yeah, that has implications. As I said, a massive, massive amount of reduced revenue for the U.S. The global trade war, when it comes to the travel consequences, is that the increased costs. Now, tariffs on goods and services will lead to higher costs for travelers, making the U.S. a more expensive destination. And that, of course, just filters down all the way through the economy. Now, retaliatory measures, of course, having that some countries have responded to the U.S. by imposing tariffs of their own on American goods and services. So again, that can impact the travel and trade all the way across the border. When it comes to the global uncertainty, a lot of people who maybe are on the cusp of going on vacation this year have decided to hold back and bank that money in the savings just to be safe, because they don't know what's ahead in the next 6 months or so. So they really need to have that little bit of cushion to fall on should the economy really go down long term, or more than just a couple of blips, as the U.S. administration is describing at this point. So yeah, people want to be prepared for that. The combined effect of ICE arrests and the detentions together, along with tariffs, have contributed to a decline in the international travel. There are some border crossings in Canada that are going southbound that are up to 70% reduction. So as you can see, a 35% estimate or general number at the top of this article is just that. It's just a generalized number, but it seems to be a very conservative number at that. So the rise of alternative destinations, so Australia, the UK, Canada, other parts of Europe, they're all capitalizing on this uncertainty. And again, it is good for the international economy to that regard, to help to make up some of the losses in other ways. But again, if there's that much financial uncertainty, how many people are just not going to vacation at all this year? And I think that's a big concern as well, for the airline industries, for the cruise ship industries, for the attractions, whether it's Disney or, anywhere else. I think that it's going to have a major impact, Angus, and hopefully we can see everything kind of calm down over the next month or so, and things kind of get back to a somewhat normal level, Angus.
Yeah, I think, I mean, if we look at the big picture here, the global scale picture of this, actually, we do know that, that travel in general, international travel, is down. And certainly I do know here in London, for example, talking to anybody in the hospitality sector, they say that things are quiet. Things are definitely quieter this year. And I don't think this is even necessarily anything to do with Trump. I think a lot of it is just global slowdown. Trump's tariffs certainly haven't helped. I mean, this is a fairly recent phenomenon. But certainly the downturn in global tourism has been going on for quite some while. So I think a lot of the root causes of that must be elsewhere. And I think it's probably to do just with the state of the global economy. There has been a general downshift in the global economy, and the cost of living crisis is a phrase that certainly we've heard regularly here in the UK, and certainly that's impacted tourist travel. And of course, we get a lot of British tourists do travel to America as part of their travel plans, and of course with the downturn, certainly here in the UK, they're cancelling those plans and they're staying at home. So we have to look at this in the context, in the global context, that overall, as you rightly said, James, that global tourism is down. But specifically in the US, yes, of course, there is a Trump factor here as well. And certainly a lot of the tourist trade in the US comes from over the border, and very well, both north and south. And of course, Donald Trump has done his level best to alienate the poor Canadians. I think if I was a Canadian, I'll be feeling a little bit miffed about spending my dollars south of the border. So it's likely, yes, that I've no doubt the Trump factor has seriously impacted a large amount of tourist trade from Canada and of course from Mexico. But of course, when you look at these statistics, again, you've got to be a little bit critical of the statistics, a little bit more circumspect, because of course, again, as you rightly pointed out, James, a lot of these statistics there's a large grey area in here, and we talk, and these statistics will actually almost, well, not accidentally, but they do bring in statistics that are related to immigration. And of course, when we look at just pure visas, a lot of these visas are, there's a whole raft of visas ranging from just a simple visitor's visa, tourist visa, all the way up to a full-on work visa, and there are various visas in between. So of course, these statistics, where do you draw the line? Where does an incoming worker or a temporary worker become a tourist? And of course, again, you've got to look at it a little bit more specifically, what actually is a tourist. And it's interesting that those numbers are significantly down, because I think it does imply, and again, it came out in what you were saying, James, that there are a lot of these tourists, so-called tourists, are in fact visiting workers who are temporarily visiting the US. And of course, the whole ICE clampdown has, of course, put them off, and they're thinking, I'm not sure I really want to come to the US because I might be accidentally rounded up and kicked out. So again, I think that the story is not quite, and again, it's very easy on a lot of these stories, and we see this regularly in the mainstream press. There's the clickbait factor where it makes a great headline saying tourism is down 6.6 billion. Well, in fact, actually, if you do pick it apart, it's not quite as much as that, because a lot of this is actually genuine. These are genuine workers who are being turned away, or potentially illegal workers who are being turned away, or people making a reconnaissance ready to illegally migrate to the US, etc., etc. So again, it's not quite as clear cut and as black and white as that. But James, yes, I think there is no doubt that the price of Donald Trump's current policies it's going to have impacts on things like tourism. It's sad to see. I mean, certainly, as you know, James, I'm a big fan of Donald Trump, and I've certainly thought, well, I need to come and visit the US. So hopefully there will be a balance where people will want to come to the US because they support Donald Trump. Who knows, James? But yeah, it's worrying at the end of the day.
There you go. But the bright side, Angus, is that Whistler Mountain is here in BC, not in Washington State. So, you know, your dream trip is still an option.
Absolutely. And you must, of course, tell your family to come and visit the Satledge office here in London when they're on their tour.
That's right.
Always welcome.
There you go. So, yeah, that's perfect. And, yeah, we're just, as I said, you know, we're just watching to see what happens. Hopefully it balances itself out and brings things back to a normal level as much as possible anyway, because I think that it's just beneficial for both sides to work out the differences and to negotiate, you know, a fair deal if things need to be adjusted. But with that said, let's take a total jump back, Angus, with another story. I spent part of today out in Abbotsford, British Columbia, where they have the Sikh temple, which is the oldest standing temple in the Western Hemisphere, and it is a beautiful building constructed back in the early 1900s. So let's take a look. I got some videos and photos to share with everybody and a bit of historic information today.
Well, good day, Angus, and all of our viewers out there. Today I'm standing here in Abbotsford, British Columbia. As you can see behind me, the Jagtar Sikh Temple is one of the oldest still standing in the Western Hemisphere. In just a few minutes, we'll actually be taking a guided tour through the facility and take a look at the historic location.
As we continue to celebrate Sikh Heritage Month in British Columbia, we're going to be delving into the rich history right here in our own Fraser Valley backyard, focusing on a landmark that stands as a powerful symbol of faith, resilience, and community, the Jagtar Sikh Temple in Abbotsford, British Columbia. Many of you may have driven past this beautiful historic building on the South Fraser Way, but its significance goes far beyond its distinctive architecture. The Gurdwara is not only a place of worship, but also holds the title of the oldest surviving Gurdwara in all of North America, and it's officially recognized as a National Historic Site of Canada. Its story is deeply intertwined with the story of Sikh communities' arrival and settlement in British Columbia. Let's turn back the clock to the early 1900s. Sikh pioneers, mostly men from Punjab, began arriving in the Fraser Valley seeking work, primarily in the agriculture and burgeoning lumber industry. They were hardworking and determined, but they faced significant challenges, including widespread discrimination and isolation in a new land. In the face of these adversities, the need for a central place to gather, worship, and support one another became paramount. And so, with incredible resolve, the community decided to build their own Gurdwara. Between 1908 and 1911, these pioneers pooled their resources, volunteered their labor, and built the Gurdwara. Much of the lumber crucial for construction was generously donated by the Abbotsford Lumber Company, owned by the Trethui family, a notable act of cross-community support at the time. The design itself is fascinating, a blend of traditional Sikh motifs and the wood frame construction common in Western Canada during that period. On February the 26th, 1912, the Jagtar Sikh Temple officially opened its doors. It instantly became more than just a house of worship. It was the heart of the Sikh community across the Fraser Valley. It served as a vital social and cultural center, a place to share meals, the langar, a tradition embodying equality and community service. It provided lodging for newcomers and travelers, and perhaps most importantly, it was a sanctuary, a place where Sikh identity could be nurtured and preserved, especially during difficult times marked by events like the Cousineau Marrow incident in 1914, which highlighted the exclusionary policies faced by South Asians. The Gurdwara was a statement of presence, faith, and perseverance. Decades later, the immense historical and cultural value of this Gurdwara was formally recognized. In 2002, the Government of Canada designated the Jagtar Sikh Temple a National Historic Site. This honour acknowledged its role as a testament to the pioneer Sikh experience in Canada and its architectural significance as the oldest surviving example of its kind in North America. Following this designation, the building underwent careful and extensive restoration completed around 2007, ensuring that this precious piece of history would be preserved for generations to come. Today, the Jagtar Sikh Temple continues its legacy. It remains an active place of worship, welcoming Sangit regularly, but it also serves another vital role. It houses a museum and interpretive center on the ground floor. Here, visitors can learn about the struggles and triumphs of those early Sikh pioneers, their contributions to British Columbia, and the enduring importance of this sacred place. The Jagtar Sikh Temple in Abbotsford is more than just wood and nails. It's a living monument to the spirit of community, the importance of faith, and the rich, diverse history of the Fraser Valley and Canada itself. It stands proudly, reminding us of the journeys made and the foundations laid by those who came before us. If you're interested in Canadian history, Sikh heritage, or simply want to understand the Fraser Valley story a bit better, a visit to the Gurdwara Sikh Temple National Historic Site offers a profound perspective. That's all the time we have for this report, but I will be bringing more throughout the week from the Sikh heritage so far this month in British Columbia, Canada. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.
So there you go, Angus. A bit of education in the show this week, and people hopefully enjoyed that video. And while you're away this week, I'll send some little reports over to the studio down in the U.S. and they can post them up just to give people a little something while we're away to think of us. And that'll be some great footage from last week at the opening ceremonies of Sikh Heritage BC, as well as from the museum and such that I was at earlier today. And yeah, what a great time it was. And so let's just remember that it is Sikh Heritage Month here in British Columbia and across Canada. There are many, many community events going on, and I encourage you to get out and experience some of them. Just the entertainment value and the education and learning about the culture. I mean, it is just second to none. It's amazing, it's welcoming, and it is a lot of laughs. Back to you, Angus.
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. No, I do love seeing reports like that, James, because it's such a rich heritage, and it's actually a relatively recent history. It's only going back 100 and something years. You think it's there are people still alive who have relatives who were there, and it's so that there is still almost that tangible element. It's almost within tangible reach. It's not that long ago, yet it was such a different world, such a different time, and such a challenging time. Certainly in somewhere like Canada, where the word there that appeared was pioneers. They were pioneers. They'd come from the Punjab and they'd arrived in Canada, and actually, again, as one of those plaques said, they faced enormous racial discrimination, racial prejudice, and yet amongst all those challenges, not just the challenges that say a white settler would have to challenge, just the natural environmental challenges. The Sikhs, of course, arrived there. They had not just the environmental challenges, they had the racial challenges, the racial discrimination challenges to establish and go up against as well. So again, it was doubly hard for these guys, and of course they built successful lives, careers, businesses, everything. It's again, as I often say when we talk about this, it's just such a testament to the resilience and the determination and the motivation of the Sikh community wherever they've landed in the diaspora. And I often pick up on the military aspects. The Sikh Lancers in that magnificent photo where they were photographed at the turn of the 20th century, again looking absolutely resplendent. And again, it's such a loss to the British Army not having a Sikh regiment, and again it's something I feel really quite passionately about. What a loss to the British Army not to have a Sikh regiment, because they're always so magnificent, certainly in their turbans and their uniforms, but of course their military heritage that they bring with them from centuries past as well. So but yeah, I think if you're in Canada, get out there, enjoy these events. And a key word again that came up there, James, it's all about education. So of course the Sikh community, even the Sikh community, have still got a lot to learn about their own heritage, and of course much of it is passed down, but go out there and learn about what your ancestors had to face on a daily basis, the challenges, because it's quite inspirational, certainly to those of us living in our cotton wool mollycoddle lives these days, how relatively easy our lives are now. You go back and look at what these guys had to face. Wow, James, certainly a very different time. They were a strong breed.
Absolutely. And speaking of strong, you'll want to tune in throughout the week to these little stories that I'll have, because one of them involves a wrestler, and you won't believe what his role was at the Gurdwara, a real life wrestler. So wait, you got to hear that. That's just a funny story that will bring you throughout the week, and many others.
Great stuff. Looking forward to that, James. Indeed. Right, let's get serious then with my first story. Jagtar Singh Johal. Just a little update on here. Of course, we did hear a few weeks ago how he was acquitted of certainly one of the key charges against him, and we said at the time that really, in legal theory, all the rest of the charges should actually fall over like dominoes equivalently, because they were very similar charges. They were based on the same legal principles that he was charged, and he's already been acquitted of this. Yet he still remains in prison. Now, what is more concerning, and his brother has revealed that he is currently being kept in solitary confinement since news of his acquittal was revealed. And the move to keep Jaggy alone, which also came with several other of his privileges being removed, and as Gurpreet, his brother, said, it portrays India's judicial staff as what he calls spiteful and determined to make Jaggy suffer. Especially since the recent validation of his claim of innocence through the acquittal of, well, he says half the cases against him. Now, again, I'm trying to actually get the specific details about this, because a lot of these reports say half the charges against him he's been acquitted of, and yet I know for a fact that 1 out of 9 charges has been thrown out, but that would leave 8. So there may be a little bit of legal interpretation here, but basically we do know that at least 1 case has been thrown out against him, and there are still some left against him, but they are very similar cases. Now, Jaggy's brother Gurpreet warned the British government that they would be held to blame should anything happen to his brother Jaggy amidst this torture. And apparently there has been another meeting set up between the Free Jaggy Now campaign lead and the UK government in about 8 weeks' time, a couple of months' time, to discuss it further. But there is, of course, a lot of concern from Gurpreet and the Free Jaggy Now campaign that British government is just not doing enough. They are really getting quite concerned because they're asking these questions, well, what actually are you doing? And Gurpreet himself, Gurpreet Singh Johal, Jaggy's brother, and he is a Labour councillor. He's also a lawyer. He spoke recently in a parliamentary gathering in London. I've got that video, and you have to excuse the weird. For some reason, they put some pretty strange music on this. And this is a report from his recent meeting in London.
Imagine this is someone that was subjected to 4 days torture from the 4th to the 7th of November 2017. He's been mentally tortured today, and now he's been further mentally tortured. And I am concerned that something what happened to him as a result. Then what do we do? So there's more action required from the government. Yes, the consular services have tried to their best to ascertain what's going on, but this now has to be picked up a level where our Foreign Secretary and the Prime Minister has to now take it up that level to say this is not on because his basic rights have been violated.
I mean, gosh, you've got to take your hats off to Gurpreet Singh Johal. I mean, the efforts he's going. I mean, how lucky Jaggy is to have a brother like Gurpreet who is fighting so hard and really bolstering this campaign to try and bring him home. Now, his local MP, Douglas McAllister of West Dunbartonshire, this is Jaggy's MP. After news came through of obviously his torture and his solitary confinement yet again, his local MP, Douglas McAllister, has stood up in Parliament yet again, the British Parliament, calling for the government to push for Jaggy's release once more. And here again is this is Douglas McAllister once again standing up in Parliament, talking to the government, asking the government for answers.
Madam Deputy Speaker, my constituent Jagtar Singh Johal, arbitrarily detained in India for 7.5 years now, was acquitted on the 4th of March of all charges against him in the first case against him to conclude. However, he has not been released because he is facing 8 other, essentially duplicate cases without the prospect of any credible evidence by the Indian prosecutors against him. Madam Deputy Speaker, time is of the essence. It's exactly 1 month since the verdict, and my constituent's family advise his conditions of detention have significantly deteriorated since the acquittal. Can I ask the Leader of the House to arrange for an urgent statement confirming our government is acting with the utmost urgency and that there is political will to push robustly for his immediate release, and recognise that now is the moment to bring him home to my constituency of West Dunbartonshire and his family in Dumbarton?
Well, my honourable friend has raised this issue with me and others many, many times, and I'm sure his constituent is really glad he's got him as his Member of Parliament in these difficult times. As I've said to him in previous answers, we want to see this case swiftly resolved, and I will absolutely ensure that the Minister discusses with him the latest in this case.
So again, it's just another, I would say, pointless response from the government. I mean, again, well done to Douglas McAllister. He's really keeping the pressure on. And the real message from this is that this grassroots campaign to really motivate the politicians to do something is actually having an effect. Because Douglas McAllister is now standing up on a regular basis in Parliament, and he is pressuring, as is other MPs now, starting to pressure the UK government to do something about this. And there is a question now appearing that is now circulating is, look, does the government actually have the will to bring Jaggy home? They're actually questioning the government's own stance on this, saying, look, are you really interested? Despite what the government says, is there really the will? Does the will exist to bring him home? Or is there other elements at play here? Are you under pressure from India, etc., etc.? I'll come on to that more in a moment. And locally in Scotland, of course, we have a separate Scottish Parliament, and Scottish MP Jackie Baillie also urged the Scottish First Minister to raise Jaggy's case with the relevant counterparts after that news of that first acquittal came through and was discussed actually in the Scottish Parliament. Now, the First Minister, John Swinney, said he did raise the incident when he visited India, and said he has also spoken to Foreign Secretary David Lammy about Jaggy's imprisonment. So basically, the good news from all this is that the pressure is really ramping up from not just now the Sikh community and of course Gurpreet, Jaggy's brother, but it is now, as I often say, this lobbying from grassroots, from the community, is now pressuring the MPs. So this has got to MP level. So the members of Parliament in the UK now are themselves under so much pressure from below them. They're saying, OK, right, well, in which case I better do something about this. So they are in turn pressuring Starmer's government. So Starmer now must be getting it from all sides. His own MPs, obviously the opposition are doing it, but his own MPs within his own party are now saying, look, what are you doing about this? David Lammy likewise is coming under pressure from other MPs. What are you doing? As British Foreign Secretary, what are you doing about it? And of course, David Lammy himself will be going to Starmer and saying, we've got to do something about this. So well done to the community. Keep this pressure up. It is once again utterly disgraceful that the British government apparently seems to be doing absolutely nothing about this. If there's stuff going on behind the scenes, well, there's not very much sign or evidence or smoke that anything is really happening. I'll talk about this on my second story in a moment, James. But once again, it does highlight, James, that I suspect the British government is all talk. There's a lot of talk going on, but very little action.
Absolutely, Angus. And I mean, face it that McAllister's doing a great job to put the pressure on, to stand up and to be heard, and to be that voice that the family needs. I mean, you know, Jaggy's brother's been working tooth and nail to try and get his brother home, and it's not right that it's dragged out this long. Now, there's also the fact that, the citizens of the UK need to also understand that we have a very similar legal system because ours is based on the British system. And in 2017, Omar Khadr sued the Canadian government for $10.5 million because they failed to take adequate actions to protect him from torture and other actions in Guantanamo Bay. But most of all, they failed to actually assert their power and their influence to get him back to Canada, as is their obligation. It's not a luxury. It's an obligation of the government to try to repatriate their citizens. And that cost the Canadians a lot of money. And I have no doubt that there are going to be legal questions when Jaggy does get home. And let's hope that those questions are put to the government sooner than later, because that means he's home sooner, Angus. And that's, nothing better at the end of the day than to see him be released and to be repatriated back to the UK.
Yeah, we in Western democracies supposedly stand up for the rule of law, we stand up for democratic principles, etc., etc. We've even fought wars trying to impose democratic regimes on foreign countries based on those principles. And yet, when we are really held up in front of the mirror, well, unfortunately, we're failing. I don't see our British government standing up for the rule of law or human rights or democratic principles when it comes to India. For some reason, the British government, and whatever shape that seems to take, whether it was the past Conservative government or it's the current Labour government, one has to question, look, really, what is it that you are standing up for? Because at the moment, it doesn't seem to be the principles that you claim to be standing up for, which does rather conveniently bring me on to my second story. And of course, I've talked a lot about lobbying from the community. Well, the Sikh Federation UK have been absolutely magnificent in their efforts in terms of representing such values. Of course, those values are inherent within the Sikh community. And it's been the Sikh community, ironically, who actually are holding the British government's feet to the fire, saying, look, you say one thing, why aren't you actually acting out your principles? And of course, the Sikh Federation have been lobbying the British government absolutely enormously, certainly, and they've been really ramping up their attacks. And attacks is too strong a word, they're too diplomatic for that. They've been ramping up their pressure on the British government to act on various issues, and there are four key issues really that they've been very clever actually about this. Their campaign has been very clever. It's been very specific. It's not just like a blanket, you've got to do something about protecting our community. They've taken some very key specific issues and they've been pushing like sharp prongs into the British government, saying, look, these specific issues are issues that you promised to do something about. Now we're holding your feet to the fire. You've got to do things about this. You've got to take action. So the Sikh Federation actually has written to all MPs in the Labour Party, that's the governing party here in the UK. So they wrote to them on the 15th of January and the 25th of February regarding these specific four issues. And they've just released an update, and again pressuring the MPs through writing to these MPs about updates on these four issues. And they've actually added a fourth issue by reminding the British government of the promise that they made at the time of the 100th anniversary of the Jallianwala Bar massacre in Amritsar. I'll come on to that in a moment. That happened, a dreadful stain on the British Empire, actually, in the history of the British Empire in 1919. And the British government, again, whilst in opposition, it's so easy to make all these promises when you're in opposition. It's when you become government, are you going to honour those promises? Well, this is what the Sikh Federation are trying to do. They're trying to get the British government to honour the promises that they made in opposition when they were saying, elect us and we promise we will do this, this and this, which so far they haven't. So anyway, so the first obvious issue is, and this is a big topic that the Labour government have promised for a long time, particularly when they're in opposition. They promised to hold a judge-led public inquiry into UK involvement in the June 1984 attack on the Ahmadiyya Sahib. That was, of course, when Britain was under the Thatcher government. And it has, and as the Sikh Federation have revealed, that they are getting increasingly worried because they're hearing these rumours regarding how the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, the FCDO as it's known, is under pressure from the Indian government to avoid or limit an independent inquiry to which Labour has promised or they've committed themselves to. Civil servants in the department are understood to be advising the government, Starmer, that a public inquiry is, what they say, expensive and could damage relations with India. Well, I've got news for you. It will damage relations with India because we know what it's all about. We know what India is up to. We know the human rights abuses that India are perpetrating against its own minorities. And of course, if we do indeed, as I said, stand up for these democratic principles and human rights, then of course it's going to damage relations. But what are we about? Are we about money or are we about democratic principles? That's really what it comes down to. Do we walk the walk or talk the talk? That's really, again, what it comes down to. The second issue is the UK government to join the other Five Eyes nations and publicly call out and address transnational repression and political interference by the Indian government. And they have pointed out that since their last letter to the Labour MPs, that they have become aware of other cases of transnational oppression by the Indian government targeting Sikh activists in Switzerland and Italy that are also not in the public domain, despite various arrests. So transnational oppression is going on all around the world. It's not just, as we often talk about in Canada and the US and the UK, it's happening wherever the Sikh diaspora exists, and wherever there are khalistan campaigners particularly, they are being targeted by India, wherever they happen to live in the world. They also bring out the story, and this concerning story that we talked about, Major Gurdwara and his appalling broadcast, and his recent, particularly one specific broadcast recently, where he called upon the criminal fraternity to take arms against British Sikhs. Now, apparently, that actual specific element has been removed, surprise, surprise, from that broadcast. But, of course, being the internet, it's still there. There are copies still existing, and, of course, Major Araya has clearly, there are movements in India saying, oh, maybe we've just gone a little bit too far here, because as we said at the time, this is inciting violence. This is actually against most criminal laws across most of the world, and I'm sure actually it's against the law in India. But it does appear now that Major Araya has removed that specific element where he calls upon criminals to take arms against Sikhs, particularly here in Britain. Anyway. And the Sikh Federation UK said that British Sikh activists in London and Birmingham, our two main cities, currently being arbitrarily detained in India for peacefully protesting in London or subject to a failed assassination plot, that there is increasing confidential information that is being brought to the attention of the Home Secretary and Foreign Secretary, and that they are being pressured now to act upon that. Two Labour MPs for these nationals appear to what they say have chosen to remain in the dark about their constituents and have shown no interest to address transnational oppression and take up the plight of their constituents. So again, they're saying, look, there are two Labour MPs whose own constituents are arbitrarily detained in India, but you're not speaking up about it. You're supposed to represent them. You're supposed to be their political representatives. Why aren't you even talking about them? Again, it's a shame, a stain on the British government. There has been no public condemnation or rebuke of the Indian authorities by relevant UK ministers for allowing inflammatory statements by Major Araya encouraging the hiring of gangs to kill Sikhs in the UK. So again, they're saying, look, Major Araya came out with his outrageous calls for violence against your constituents. Why aren't you talking about it? You're not even condemning it. You're not even talking about it, never mind condemning it. Then, of course, they raised the third issue, which is Jagtar Singh Johal, which I talked about great length. And there is a question, look, are you under pressure from India not to release him? Are you under pressure from India not to even talk about him, etc., etc.? So, again, it does raise that question. And then the fourth issue is, of course, this Jallianwala Bagh massacre that happened in 1919. This is a terrible situation where General Dyer of the British Army massacred, and the numbers vary, depends which source you read, but it literally is anything between 350 and 1,500 Indians were murdered by the British Army, where literally a line of British infantry fired upon a gathered mass of protesters and killed in cold blood men, women and children. I don't know about children, I can't confirm that, but certainly men and women were massacred, were shot in cold blood by General Dyer's soldiers in 1919. It was an absolute outrage. It was a response to, in fact, it was, maybe we'll do another story about it, but it was in response to the Rowlatt Act, which was an act that the British ruling authorities brought in against, they were concerned about sedition happening, so they brought in this legal act that took away various human rights of the population, trying just to keep them in order. The local population said, you can't do this, we protest against this. They gathered in a square in Jallianwala Bagh and they were turned upon by the British troops. Again, an absolute outrageous, embarrassing stain, a shameful stain on the British Empire. And the Sikh community, they weren't all Sikhs who were murdered, but the large part were Sikhs. And unsurprisingly, the Sikh community is saying you've got to apologise for this, particularly on the 100th anniversary in 2019. And again, the Labour Party promised that they would launch an apology. Where is that apology? Well, we're still waiting. Now, last week, the Sikh Federation also noted that Bob Blackman, yes, this MP, this Conservative MP, who we talk about on a regular basis, who's clearly in the payroll of the RSS, he was unashamedly trying to hijack the whole issue of Jallianwala Bagh and airbrush out Sikhs, knowing the massacre took place on Vaisakhi in Amritsar, and by far the largest number of those gathered, killed and injured were from the Sikh minority. So again, Bob Blackman, under pressure from his RSS paymasters, is trying to hijack the issue and just say, oh, the Sikhs weren't involved, again, because they don't want any news being attributed to the Sikh community that might benefit and highlight the presence and existence of the Sikh community. And then they sign off, and it's Jagtar Singh, one of our regular guests on the show. Jagtar Singh, who's the lead exec for Sikh Federation UK, signs off by saying, with the parliamentary recess fast approaching, we assume plans have been made by the Prime Minister to make a suitable apology by the 13th of April. Well, Jagtar, I'm not sure I hold your optimism on this, but James, once again, it is great to see that the British Sikh community in the form of the Sikh Federation UK once again are calling upon the British government, pressuring the British government, saying, look, you've made all these promises. Are you going to deliver? Well, James, I have a horrible feeling I know the answer to that. I wouldn't be surprised, really, James.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, Angus. I definitely wouldn't hold my breath for that to come to fruition. But at the same time, I really have a lot of respect for the organization to continue to push the politicians to be held accountable and to make sure that they fulfill those promises that they have made. It was a big boost for them in order to obtain that Sikh vote. And if they aren't going to live up to it, then of course, there's the long-term credibility. But at the same time, the Sikh Foundation in the UK, they are always there to hold their feet to the fire and to really be a diplomatic and level approach to the problems. They don't get loud, they don't get obnoxious, they don't protest so much as they like to just try to work within the system to come to a compromise or come to a solution. And they are very proactive that way.
Indeed, and I'm a regular critic of the British government, whatever form they seem to take, because I am sick and tired, just as a normal citizen, of all these promises being made. And of course, once they're elected, those promises are forgotten about. And I have to say, the Sikh community's faith in their own Labour Party politicians is, sadly, I feel is misplaced. And the only way things are ever going to change is by keeping this pressure up. And you do have to salute the resilience of the British Sikh community for their robust and their continuing efforts, their massive efforts, certainly channeling through this magnificent organisation, Sikh Federation UK, who've done such sterling work for the community, pressuring the British government. And let's hope that finally we will start to see results, because it frankly will be about time that a British politician actually delivers on a promise for once. But anyway, let's move on that after a good healthy bashing of our politicians. Let's move on to a final a quick shout out.
Politician to follow through on their words, not just UK, but they could be the first in the world.
Yeah, absolutely, James, and you're absolutely right. What is it about politicians the world over? They seem to come from the same mould, don't they? Isn't it funny? Anyway, let's move on to. I'm going to move on now to an area that we don't cover enough, and I'm going to give a shout out to New Zealand, our audience in New Zealand. I do know there are certainly one or two members of our audience who are down under in New Zealand, so big shout out to you guys. We don't often cover stories from down there, but I'm delighted just to briefly tack onto this, and maybe I'll do a full story on this next week. But we do know that the diaspora there have, of course, been targeted, as we talked about earlier in the show. They have likewise been targeted by India by transnational oppression. And community group New Zealand Sikh Youth have revealed that their National Intelligence Service in New Zealand, the NZSIS, that's the New Zealand Security Intelligence Service, are actually now publicly encouraging the country's Sikh communities to report foreign interference amid ongoing concerns about India's transnational oppression agenda. So it really is affecting the community down there in New Zealand. Now, the NZSIS, the security service, are saying that concerns can be reported directly to the New Zealand government. They've given a link And the call comes as the Ministry for Ethnic Communities release resources to support the communities to tackle such foreign interference. And again, links are given to the government website. And last year, apparently, New Zealand Sikhs held their first ever national conference on foreign interference. So again, it's quite sad, James, that even in somewhere like New Zealand, and of course we've got these massive diaspora communities in Canada, in the US and across Europe, and there are these relatively small communities, whether it's Malaysia, whether it's in Germany, or whether it's New Zealand, even these small communities where you think, oh, surely they're going to be safe in places like this. Even these small communities, India is so intent on trying to destroy and bury the Khalistan movement particularly, but of course it's Sikh minority community. It's even turning its efforts and its resources on places like New Zealand. I find this even quite astounding and quite shocking, James.
Absolutely. And let that just be a reminder to any of our English-speaking viewers out there that if you have family members who only speak Punjabi or other languages, it's essential that you allow them the information or translate that information to them so that they feel safe, that they know they have somewhere to turn. Because let's face it, if they're old school, they may not trust law enforcement and government coming from the repression that they had in India. So make sure that you explain it to them and translate that information, please.
Indeed, absolutely. So, as I say, a big shout out to our audience members down in New Zealand. So we must cover more stories for you guys. And right, James, in the interest of time, as it marches on, let's move on to our comments section. And loads of great comments. Thank you, everybody, for all your comments. As I say, sadly, we won't have perspective shows over the next few days, so we won't have time to cover so many wonderful comments. So we've had to cherry pick just one or two to talk about. And of course, most of our regulars have been very active in the comments columns. And one of which is, of course, Hat B, who says, in 2023, Indian government also murdered Deep Sidhu, lawyer and actor, and of course Sidhu Moosewala, who was a singer and actor, and they were strong voices of the farmers' protest, not just on the farmers' protest. Both of them were very vocal and very influential and very outspoken about most of those Sikh issues, James. And again, we mustn't forget these two guys who died under very suspicious circumstances, one in a supposed car accident, one was gunned down. But of course, all the accusations really and all the conspiratorial belief is that, again, it's the Indian government behind these murders. So nobody in the Sikh community, you dare speak out, you are not safe.
Absolutely. And, it's been linked, or it's been pointed to that there may have been the use of of certain Lawrence Bishnoi gang or crew members that were involved acting at the behest of the government of India. So, it's still a lot of answers that need to come out on that.
Indeed. And we certainly will keep mentioning their names, as I have no doubt our commenters will, just to ensure that their memories don't just stay alive, as that the perpetrators will one day hopefully be brought to justice. Jagtar Singh refers to our story in California. Well done to the Californian community who managed to push their Senator Jasmeet Bains and Caballero to pass the first reading of the Transnational Repression Bill that went through in California. And TC responds by saying, look, the same thing should happen in the UK. Well, yes, absolutely, James. We've just been talking about why is the British government being not so protective and not so representative of their Sikh community. The British people should know who and what they're voting for. We Sikhs are wary of being painted falsely with the continual attempts of misinformation that feeds this readily impressionable audience. Transparency is necessary for democracy. And again, you talk about fake narratives promoted by India, and it is definitely not democratic. And kudos to Canada on this matter. Yeah, James. And I think really this comment just highlights, as we often say, that we often contrast the failings of the British government in terms of its own Sikh community, contrast that with the US and Canada, where their governments, your governments, James, have done such an amazing effort to protect and represent your Sikh communities.
Yeah, and again, a big part of it is outreach to make sure that the Sikh community is involved in the process. And I think that goes a long way. And I think that the UK could learn a lot about that and bringing them on board to find solutions and to raise public education, Angus.
Indeed, and we always ask this question: why on earth is the British government so almost deliberately, willingly not working on behalf of its Sikh community? It always seems to take the side of India. And Rational Thinker comes up with, well, one belief, and actually this is something we've not mentioned before. India is a Commonwealth state of the UK. That's why the UK acts the same way of the Hindutva mindset. Well, yes, of course, India and the Commonwealth, the British state has its Commonwealth. It has this relationship with former colonial states around the world, whether it was Canada or India or wherever it happens to be. And of course, there is this Commonwealth relationship, and that Commonwealth is linked to the British government. It is also, of course, linked to the British royal family, etc. So, and I've really tried to dig deep into why on earth the British government has been like this as opposed to Canada and the US. Why does the British government align so closely and even beneath the surface? And again, by that I'm referring to, for example, our intelligence services. Why do they work so closely, hand in hand with India? Yet we have this large Sikh community here in the UK who've contributed so much to British society on a continual basis. They contribute massively to our armed forces. They have a massive contribution throughout history, whether it's through the world wars or whatever militarily. So why on earth is our Sikh community here in the UK not just protected, but why isn't it even recognised by our British government? Why do they seem to take the side of India? Yeah, maybe the Commonwealth is yet another element. And of course, we do have this historical tie with India. But yeah, maybe the Commonwealth, James, maybe there are deeper links that we don't even know about with India that might explain this.
Absolutely. And then there's also the trade factor and what have you done for me lately attitude that, the India government has a negotiating power when it comes to the economy and trade, holds a lot more cards than the Sikh community on its own. So, I hate to say it, but I think that there's a lot of money at play when it comes to that decision, Angus.
Yeah, and I think, certainly when I ask among the community what their opinion is, the mainstream belief, the mainstream expectation is that it's all down to simple dollars, money, in that Britain is so desperate to tie up a trade deal with India that they're just saying, sorry, but the Sikh community are just collateral damage for that. We don't care. What matters most is a trade deal. Who knows? But personally, I think it runs deeper than that. I think there are other elements in play here. Why, for some bizarre reason, we seem to align more closely with India than we do with our Sikh community. Softy Muffins raises a story that we haven't talked about before. This is, you say Kapil Sharma of the BJP was leading rioters in New Delhi. This is 5 years ago. And these riots killed many people there. And there are videos of Kapil encouraging the rioters to kill. And there's an FIR filed against him after 5 years, finally. What about justice? Yes, indeed. And in fact, the guy you're talking about is Kapil Mishra. And a Delhi court last week ordered an FIR, First Information Report, to be filed against this BJP leader and State Minister, Kapil Mishra, for his alleged involvement in violence that broke out in Delhi in February 2020. So the Chief Judicial Magistrate Vaibhav Churasaya of the Rouse Avenue Courts held that there was enough material to warrant further investigation into whether Mishra committed an offence of inciting violence in these riots. Now, the court passed the order on a plea that was filed by Muhammad Ilyas. And of course, the target of much of these riots were the Islamic community. And Ilyas said that he had approached the police 3 times already asking for this case to be registered, to register a FIR against Mishra, in response to which he was told that they would register his complaint only against unspecified rioters. In other words, there's a political element once again here, James, and once again it does point to various political corruption in India. Because this guy is a BJP minister, a state minister, is that the police appear slightly reluctant to raise an FIR against him because he represents the government, James. Does one raise an eyebrow in suspicion here?
And that's not uncommon, Angus. It's something that we talk about all the time, is that corruption, the integrity or lack thereof in many situations, in many cases. And this is just another clear example.
Indeed, absolutely. Well, maybe we'll follow that story and see if that FIR does actually lead to formal charges and a court appearance. Well, I don't think we'll hold our breath on that one. Right, final set of comments to bring us to a close today. Balvinder Jit Nagy. Hi guys, I'm an English Sikh. Well, welcome Balvinder. Thank you for your comment. And again, as I always take the opportunity, a big shout out to our British audience. Hi guys, welcome to the show. Thank you for watching. But of course, we do have a large audience over in Canada and the US, James, do we not?
We do.
So we always like to give you a shout out, but particularly to our audience here in the UK, just a quick shout out and thank you for joining us, Balvinder. We hope you become a regular viewer of the show. Human says, Lost World of the British Islands, strategy to alienate Sikhs who fought world wars with the British. It doesn't seem to work in the Sikhs' favour. It's time to give Sikhs their homeland and let them live in peace. Sikhs are a proud people. They need a reason to live with pride and free. And basically, I think that the premise of this statement is very clear, is that, look, the British should actually acknowledge the Sikh community instead of ignoring them and not protecting them. The Sikhs, as you rightly have said, have fought 2 world wars for the British. They've worn the British uniform and they've contributed so much. So it really is about time that the British recognise this. And as I often say, I think the debt of honour that the British nation holds for the Sikh community is to deliver their homeland, James.
Absolutely. And let's face it, even if they have their peaceful and quiet own country where they can live with pride and they can be free, you know that that's not going to stop them from continuing their work and their personal obligations to stand up for others around the world who are not free and who are not safe and who are not able to live in that comfort. So again, you know, even though they may get khalistan, they will still be representing the side of right when it comes to right and wrong.
Absolutely, and it was the British who took their homeland off the Sikh community in 1849. I think we have an absolute debt of honour, as I often say, to give it them back, at least campaign so that khalistan can happen. And Icon Carr says, look, it doesn't matter how hard you're defending Hinduism right now, as we often say, we are not anti-Hindu, we're very pro-Hindu on this channel. It doesn't matter about Hinduism. What really matters is khalistan. We need our khalistan. And my Google finishes that off by saying, thank you for your support. It's an absolute pleasure to say I feel a personal responsibility on behalf of the British community. We should support khalistan. For a most beleaguered segment of world population that is Sikhs, Sikhs are the only people in the world who are homeless, James.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I've never heard of it termed that way, but it is a beautiful way to look at it. Not in a positive in terms of beautiful, but no, that is a great summary.
And I think that's absolutely right. And I think that, as I often draw a parallel with Israel, at the end of the Second World War, the Allies gave the Jewish population their own country in the form of Israel. Why on earth can we not do the same for the Sikh community and give them their own homeland in the form of khalistan? That is absolutely what we stand for and what we will continue to campaign for all the reasons that we talk about on a daily basis. But unfortunately there, we must draw perspectives for a close for today. But thank you so much for watching as always. Don't forget, as I say, we're off air just for the next couple of days. But James will be submitting various reports, so do keep an eye out for those about Sikh Heritage Month over in Canada. But don't forget to keep your comments coming in. Please do keep the comments coming in. Always great to read those. Always great to have points of interest that you raise on a regular basis, so do keep those coming in. Don't forget you can message us directly at message@satellitv.com on any items that you'd like to highlight that we might have missed. But that is it for another day. Thanks so much for watching. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.